Paddy Power, sponsors of the Road to Cheltenham.
Hello everyone, welcome to Road to Cheltenham. Bit of a different look to this week's show because we're going to be focusing on 9 races that we've only really referred to in passing during the series so far. Those are the handicap races, the chases and hurdles at the Cheltenham Festival. And the reason we can focus on them today is because yesterday at Cheltenham, the weights for all of those races were revealed. And therefore, we're going to be discussing those races during the course of this show, Ruby. And you've brought out 1 or 2 horses in each of the races that caught your eye, or particular points you want to make about run style.
Yeah, small things, Lydia, because look, even when I was riding, did I really pay much attention to handicaps this far out? No. Till you know what's going to be top weight and what the field is going to look like, then I tend to form an opinion around a handicap. So mine are not strong, those views. But you're right, it is a different show. You've robbed my seat. You want to be in charge because we have a guest.
We do have a guest. Nice segue. You say that you know that I want to be in charge. Now you're doing the presenter role.
Because we only have an hour for this show.
2 tropes for the price of 1 there. Michael Harris, the British Horseracing Authority handicapper, is joining us first. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
You're going to be chatting about the handicap chases at the Cheltenham Festival with us.
Yeah, the weights were released yesterday, so I'll talk through the chases and sort of some of the horse and the shapes of the field.
Yeah, where potentially the cut-off points might be in terms of horses getting in for the field sizes.
Yeah, exactly. We've got historical records of what weight sort of usually gets in the race, so we'll have a look at them and see what horses might and might not get in the races. Okay,
that sounds great. So Michael's here for the first half of the show. The second half of the show, his colleague Andrew Mealor will be here to talk about the hurdle races. They'll also be answering your tweets, as will Ruby and I will be getting involved as well. And we're going to start with Ian Broders's tweet. There it is. And is there any consideration ever given to what a horse might be rather than what's been seen on the track so far? It's the elephant in the room, but everyone knows that not every horse runs fully on its merits every time, says Ian. How hard is it to avoid speculation? I'll ask the speculation question to Michael in a moment, but we have to make a point about the language there.
It's very easy for Ian to use the wording and language he's used there. Obviously, if you're sitting this side of the desk, there are particular words in there that you can't use. And look, that is Ian's opinion, but look, we would use phrases like possibly eye-catching or one that stayed on from very far back, things like that. But unfortunately, we can't all use the language. You can, Ian.
No, it's different, isn't it? And those are the rules. At the same time, we can't deny the landscape, you know.
Don't think we are.
No. Okay. But from your perspective, Michael, as a handicapper, promise, you know, what can you build in? You know, thinking and looking at breeding that the horse wants a different distance. Mm-hmm. How do you approach that?
We've got to assess what the horse has achieved on track. I think horses who run a bit cosily, so they may ease down towards the line, we can speculate, if you want to use that term, on how far much superior the horse was than the runner-up. Maybe it's won a length and we think it might have won by 4 lengths. So we have that licence to assess the races, but that is, again, on what the horse has achieved on the day. We're not just doing that because we think the horse is going to improve next time. Horse might need 3 miles, run over 2 miles. We can't assume that it's going to improve when it goes up in trip, because often that isn't the case anyway. We've got to assess horses as we see them to make competitive races as they go along, and then as they run again, we'll assess them again and update the marks.
Yes, because a length is not a length is not a length. I mean, a pushed out length is different from an eased down length.
Absolutely, and it's more of a pushing out, easing, rather than, well, I think that's one nicely, I'm just going to add another 3 or 4 pounds on just for the sake of it, because that then has a knock-on effect to all the other horses that horse runs against next time, which is always what we're trying to achieve, good competitive racing.
And I think it's that perspective that's often overlooked in terms of the horses that have finished behind and how the whole framework of the race has got to work.
I think so. I say one of the common complaints we sort of get is we've been unfair to a certain horse, which obviously we try and avoid. We're trying to just do our job as best we can. And the bigger picture is, yes, we want to give that horse an even chance in this race, and also every other horse which might run against it. If we're unfair to one horse, it discourages people from running against it potentially, and that's not what we want. We want good competitive racing, so we try and treat every horse the same as we can.
Okay. Right, well, we are going to get on with things, and we're going to go through the races in chronological order, well, the chases in chronological order, then the hurdles in chronological order. That means that we start, of course, with the Ultima handicap chase, one of my favourite handicaps of the year, actually, over 3 Mile 1. Into Overdrive is 7-1 with our sponsors Paddy Power, and obviously the numbers next to each horse are the weights that they have been allotted. Sometimes next in at 8-1, Nassalam also 8-1, 9-1 upwards, the rest. So, give me an overview of the race, Michael, and how it compares to previous seasons.
I think it looks like a good competitive race. Entry numbers slightly down. 24 runners in this, so there's usually a good competitive field. I think there's probably a potential that they may not end up with a full field in this, possibly. Usual cut-off last 5 years has been around 136, sort of range from 132 to 140, so quite a wide range. 136 is a 5-year average. Potentially might drop slightly below that, so 10 stone 5 would be 136 at the moment. You might get in just below that, and I'd say there's a chance it might go quite way down to the bottom of the entry list, I think.
Okay, and when you were talking yesterday, you focused on last year's race, and we can actually take a look at that. It was won by Corrick Rambler with Oscar Elite back in 3rd, T Clipper 4th and R Power 5th. How do you see these panning out this time around?
Yeah, well obviously last year's winner Corrick Rambler has entered again, £6 higher than when he won the race last year. Oscar Elite, who won the Renaissance recently, is only £1 higher than he was in this race last year. So we've got a good representation. The Northern trainers have actually won the race the last 2 years. So Corrick Rambler obviously been again. They've obviously got another nice contender into Overdrive. But I think this is usually a good solid race, and last year's form isn't no bad thing going into this year's race.
Okay, so that's Oscar Elite there with the big white face, T Clipper with the sheepskin noseband. R Power with the sheepskin cheek pieces weakening, and coming through, Ruby, Corrick Rambler with the white patch at the end of his nose to come and win.
Yeah, got a brilliant ride from Derry Fox to win last year. Obviously our Power, who's dropping back there into 5th, has gone and won. He's only 2 starts this year at Ascot and Kempton off marks of 136 and 141. He dropped £2 for this run. He has now gone up to 147, and yeah, he got 6 for winning at Kempton, so he's 147 in this race. He obviously has to have improved. Maybe he has. Time will tell. But look, it is a competitive race, but it is a race that's been dominated by the English horses.
Yes, unusually.
Yeah, I think the last Irish winner was Dundee.
Yeah. Grand National entries for Corrick Rambler and R Power. Oscar Elite was a fresher horse this time last year when finishing
He went
3rd.
in last year after having not run since Cheltenham in January, I think it was. This year he's had a run in February. He has had disappointing runs in the past. Maybe fresh suits Oscar Elite. I have a slight suspicion it does.
Yeah, Joe Tizard, his trainer, was talking about how well he was, and that's why they decided to run him in the Reynolstown, which he won. They also floated the possibility he could be entered in the Brown Advisory, supplemented for it. I was wondering about T Clipper. First time cheek pieces in that race that we saw. Is there a possibility, do you think, of a switch of headgear from Tom Lacey?
Possibly. Needs to spark something.
Okay, so you picked out Into Overdrive from the Rowland Merrick, and you also wanted to mention Fanny and Destraval, who finished 3rd.
It's a fairly obvious one to pick out the favourite, but he has been in really good form Into Overdrive. Here he is in the Rowland Merrick. Sounds Russian. I thought ran well for a long way in the Cotswold Chase. Topville Ben is jumping the fence. He ran well at Leopardstown, and Fanny and Destraval stayed on from way out the back. So Fanny and Destraval ran in last year's Ryanair off a mark of 155. So he's dropped down from that. And there's a swing in the way it's Into Overdrive from this run in Weatherby. I thought he was eye-catching enough behind Janza in the Denman Chase last week. He switched from the inside of the track. He swerved to the right-hand side. He did stay on the track. I wasn't sure if he had. When he came back into shot, he was still on the track. He went so far across it. And I think he's one that the handicappers have given a chance, and he could be interested in a big prize, Fanny and Destraval.
Okay. Great form from Into Overdrive this season. He's been so progressive. You know, only been beaten by L'Impresse.
It is, and it's rock solid. Into Overdrive's form. He's up £5 for that win at Weatherby. But you could easily argue, with the way Sounds Russian has run since, with the way Topville Ben has run since, that actually for standing in his stable, he is one of those horses who could have gone up again. Handicappers can do that. They chose not to with this fella, but he could have.
Okay, let's take a look next at Beauport, shall we? Ruby's been quite sweet on him all season. He hasn't gone on, I think, as you probably expected from his first time out second, defeat of Miller's Bank.
No, he hasn't, but look, this was a solid run for a novice, and I was particularly impressed with it at the time. As you say, he hasn't really gone on from it. But he did beat Boot Hill last year in a novice handicap when he was rated 142 at Uttoxeter, and he gave Boot Hill weight on that occasion. He's in here off a mark of 143 over fences. You've Miller's Bank, Manila Drama, Bear Gills, Corrick Rambler falling out the back of the shot. Yeah, I think if Nigel Twiston-Davies gets him back to the form he was in this day, I think he's a squeak.
He's going back up in trip as well to
yeah,
see Miles.
I think Everton will suit him, and you saw one turn him in last year in the black and white Imperial Commander colours. That was Imperial Aura, was it? Or
Fantasticas.
Fantasticas. He's dropped a lot in the weights as well, but it is a race that Twiston-Davies has had targeted in the past.
Yeah, and novices dominated it as well this time last year, as you saw. Right, okay, those are our thoughts on the Ultimate. We move on next to the Grand Annual. So, the Grand Annual it is, the Johnny Henderson Grand Annual. Let's have a look at the betting. Samoa, Dino Blue, 7-1 joint favourites at the top of Paddy Power's market. More Irish runners than usual in this race?
Yeah, I think that's probably the main takeaway from the entries. We're up at 48% of the qualified runners are Irish trained, which is the highest it's been for a good while. And also 7 of the top 9 in the weights are also Irish trained, so you'd say they've got quantity and the quality at the top of the handicap. 20 runners. Last year's winner Globe was sitting £3 higher, and the 1, 2, 3 from last year's race are all entered again, so it looks again a good competitive race.
And where's the cut-off there, do you think it'd probably be?
Last 2 years has been 136, so I think it'd be hovering around there again, sort of 135, 136.
And Britain did particularly well in the handicap chases last season, and normally that large number of Irish runners we tend to see in the hurdles as a general rule.
Yeah, it's been more of a trend in the hurdle races. Last year there was definitely fewer runners in the chases from Irish. There should be probably more this year, probably at least a third, if not half, in some of the handicap chases as well as the hurdles.
So should we be afraid?
I'm not afraid. So.
That's good to hear. Let's start.
You should be neutral. You're supposed to get all these horses to finish in a line.
Well, that's why he's not afraid.
I'm hoping they are going to all finish in a line, but it's not happened yet, has it?
Andy Dufresne, Ruby, discuss last year's second to Global Citizen. This is the story of his season.
Yeah, look, he hasn't won a race, Lydia, since 2019. I think 2020, December 2020. He's placed in the race last year off a mark of 155. He runs again off a mark of 155 now. I have since learned he got a £3 penalty for last year's race, and it's dropped back down to 155. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. At 158 in last year's race.
155, got £3 for it. Here he is at Christmas dropping out the back. No, this is, it's gentleman to me. Andy Dufresne is back there. Yeah, look, he's dropped down to, and I think that's the slight issue with transparency for people who are really into the handicaps. I wouldn't have noticed, but had it been published somewhere that Andy Dufresne was a 158 and you had taken 3 off him, I think a lot of the debate around Andy Dufresne's mark wouldn't be there.
The performance figure of 158 was available on the British Horseracing Authority website, wasn't it?
Yeah, so on the British Horse Racing results section, for all the British races, we publish our performance figures with the handicapper who's dealt with the race and the current ratings.
Okay, but Ruby's point is that since then, the adjustment that you've made, nobody found out until the press conference yesterday.
Yeah, because he wasn't entered up in Britain. We don't publish the Irish mark sort of on a weekly basis like we do the British runners.
Yeah, we're going to discuss that more fully later on in the show, because clearly it's something that is always talked about every time. Same mark as last time. Is Andy Dufresne? I mean, essentially, lots of people think he's a plot, don't they? Plot or not? For me, it's not.
Me neither. No, I wouldn't be happy. Best luck to him. Hope he wins. He's not getting any younger, but I think there's others in there with chances, and he just doesn't jump off the page for me.
Right, so you focused in on a couple of mares from the Opera Hat, Magic Days and Dino Blue.
Yeah, look, you remember Global Citizen, very handy last year. The old Grand Annual on the new courses now on the old course. Both these mares like to go forward, Magic Days and Dino Blue. She's second favourite. Magic Days is probably the value if you're an each-way punter. On this occasion, they raced. Magic Days carried £4 more than Dino Blue, and she beat her by 3.5 lengths. Do the simple maths, that's 7.5. There's £8 between them at Cheltenham. Magic Days was placed in a mare's novice hurdle behind Tell Me Something Girl. Dino Blue disappointed in it, so track form, probably a Magic Days' side, and she's a lot more experienced than Dino Blue. So look, there's nothing between them, but if you're looking for value, the price is definitely with the Henry Bombhead's mare rather than Willie Munger.
Yeah, who finished 8th in last year's Arkle behind Edward Stone. Dino Blue, of course, still a novice. She could run elsewhere as well in the Mrs.
She
Handicap.
could, but you would have thought a rating of 140, even with the mare's allowance. Because the mare's allowance doesn't make a rate of 147. That's her official rating, 140. So actually, if you take 7 off it in a conditions race, she'd be 133. Thereabouts.
You say so.
No, I don't. I never understand that one. But like that's her official mark. So if she ran in a conditions race with a £7 allowance, I just still don't think that's high enough.
Now, I was quite interested in Unexpected Party dropping back to 2 miles, but you've got an objection to his chance.
Not an objection, but I do think in an old grand annual on the new course, yeah, you could see this horse having a chance. But if Harry drops him in stone last, like he does here over 2.5 in the 2 miles and 1 mile 7 furlongs on the old course, it's going to be hard for him to get by 20. How many runners?
There's 20 runners in
20 runners in this. He'll have to pass 19. Yeah. That'd be difficult.
Yeah. But he's certainly shaped as though the drop back to 2 miles would be a good thing for him, I think. That's all.
Probably would, yeah, and he's a strong traveller, but just don't think this is a great track for hold-up horses over fences. The new course was Belvano springs to mind, but the new course, or the old course, I mean, not so easy.
Belvano, yes. But that's all right. Gino has since franked the form as well by finding well in the Pendle. So that's the Grand Annual. Let's move on to the Plate. On to the Magners Plate now. Let's have a look at the betting for that. Again, usual format. You can see the weights there and the betting from Paddy Power on the right. So Scottish is the 4-1 favourite. Il Ridotto and adamantly chosen next in at 7-1. But we're going to start with Phil Dorr. Ruby, your thoughts on him?
Look, again a novice. Here he is beating San Roy at Navan first time up, both having their first run, and you can see how far clear they are at the third. This was a solid performance, Lydia. He went from here then to Leopardstown at Christmas, very bad, made a bad mistake at the last stage, but you know, San Roy ended up winning the race. I just was looking at Phil Dorr. Now I've no idea where he's going. He could well run over hurdles, but when you watched him in the Irish Arkle then behind Il Fabiolo, Appreciated, Dysart Dynamo, he looked like he was crying out for a step up and trip. Is there a race where he could possibly be unexposed? I think it's this one. Connections own Mighty Potter, so they're not going to run Phil Dorr in the turners. And is he unexposed to off 151 with a £2 weight for age allowance? He's a professional, mature looking horse. I think he could be.
In terms of the shape of the race, Michael?
Yeah, quite similar to the Grand Annual in terms of the Irish representation. At this time last year, you had 30% of the field was Irish. It's up to 44% this year. I quite enjoy this race from a handicapper's point of view because you have all the races throughout the season. They're basically the same sort of race over and over again. This year, the Paddy Power from November, that race is well represented in this and has worked out very strongly this year. In terms of the cut-off, last 2 years 132 and 130. I'd imagine this time with this race it might creep up again slightly, so more like 133, 134 this time. Okay.
We must talk about the favourite, Ruby. So Scottish, this is a horse I've been really interested in for the step up and trip. That run at Ascot I thought it was really eye-catching. We've got his performance at Carlisle. Yeah, and look, this was Richie McLaren in Autumn, and he won quite cosily. He then went to Ascot where he chased home Boot Hill when Michael O'Sullivan rode him and claimed £5 off his back, which was stealing £5 as well. But look, since then he's risen. He ran an Ascot off 135, he's going to run here off 143, so he's gone up £8 for that run. But I suppose when you look at where Boot Hill has gone from since Ascot, he then went to Sandown and was second at John Bond, went to Kempton and beat Oak on Risco. Boot Hill has crept up, and unfortunately for So Scottish, by standing in his stable due to what Boot Hill has been doing, it looks like So Scottish has gone up too. That probably, I don't agree with it, but if the handicappers are framing races to make them competitive, that's why they do it. I can see why it's happened. I don't really agree with that, but that's how it happens. You've mentioned that before, but it's sort of a collateral form, right?
It's collateral form, but likewise, I think with collateral form, or Michael does it, and he can correct me here, do horses drop standing in their stables as much as they rise?
Much more, actually, yeah. It's
much more.
On average, everyone goes up, 3 come down. So.
Okay, right, okay. So, that's one of the facets of handicapping. Again, we're going to go into it in more detail later on in the show, but next we're going to move on to the Kim Muir. I called it the Kim Muir. I should give it the full title, shouldn't I? It's the Fulk Warwin Kim Muir. Fulk never gets enough love in this race. It's for amateur riders. It's a handicap chase. Stumptown, very interesting. 7-2 favourite with Paddy Power. Mr. Incredible next in at 4-1. I'll talk to you in a moment, Ruby, about Stumptown, because I know that Gary O'Brien, who was on the show with you last week, was very, very keen on Stumptown. But how do we feel about the football in Kim Muir in terms of the replication of entries also in the Ultima, because there's quite a bit of overlap between the two races?
Yeah, there's a lot of cross entries across the two races. This is obviously the 0 to 145 race, which has a slight effect on the entries for this, but it looks again very competitive. Over the quarter of the entries are Irish. Grand National entries in this race as well as the Ultima. Last year you got an off 127, which was I think it'll be a bit higher again this year, probably closer to 130. But again, looks a good competitive field.
Okay. Ruby, you're going to start with Am I Right before we discuss...
I am, but like you're talking about the crossover, the reason that the Kim Muir, my belief as to why the Kim Muir was capped at 145 was to force those from 145 upwards into the Ultima. And I got the top weight in the Ultima now is only 159, but where do you want to force the horse into the Gold Cup then? Is that at 165? I don't know. What number is that? What's the magic number to make you run the Gold Cup and not in the handicap?
I think it's probably a crossover point, isn't it? You can get sort of high 150 horses that fancy the chance of going to the Gold Cup. I think in general, just handicapping in general, those horses that are rated sort of mid 150s are always on that crossover of carrying top weight in a handicap or going down a grade big route.
Perfect, brilliant. This is Am I Right in the yellow colours. This was the novice chasing Mace. Ramalay is the Devil's coachman. Obviously that result was switched around, but I have been impressed, Lydia, with Am I Right throughout the season. I think he's a wonderful jumper, and that was a decent novice chase. He's in off a mark at 142. I think we're ready to take his chance here. He could run it, he could have a big shout. Thought he was travelling particularly well at Leopardstown when Rachel Blackmore actually got knocked off him in the race won by Gaillard Dominion.
Who would you expect to ride?
Good question.
Thank you.
I have no idea. I would imagine an Irish amateur.
Would there be is there any obvious go-to for the connections?
Amateurs and Henry's. He doesn't run that many in bumpers. Davy Roach, who's Henry's assistant and head man. So whilst I saw him riding the chase, so I'm not sure he would, but outside of that, no, should there be?
There'll be plenty of people wanting to ride, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Stumptown then. Gary was very keen on this horse.
Very keen. Had to go to Sandown to get a penalty, so he ran a Sandown off a mark of 125. Johnny Burke rode him. He jumped absolutely brilliantly, and I think whoever rides this fella is going to have great fun if he runs here. Now he will get into the Ultima, I think, off 135. I think there's a big chance he will. He'll be bang on at the bottom, but I think he's absolutely bolted in here, and to be honest with you, I'd say he was valued for the £10 and a bit more. You can't up him now, so Gavin Cromwell can't give up to me, but I don't think 135 is going to stop him.
It's an emphatic success, isn't it?
It is. So why does he only get 10? Explain that one to us.
Well, you got to take. We often get questions about comparing a horse that's won a particular race and gets a rise of 8, and a horse that's won a perceived lesser race and gets a rise of 11. And again, it goes back to what we talked about at the start. We're just there to assess the ability of the horse, the opposition, the way the race is run can determine how much you put up a horse. You get very competitive races, you might only put the winner at 1 because they've all finished very close. It's been an evenly run race. You might get a falsely run race where you've got to extend the distances to extend the superiority. So it just depends on the circumstances of the race.
So ever get a race where you actually drop the winner?
We have done, yeah, or certainly leave them unchanged. If we think it hasn't had to improve to win the race, that it does happen. We probably get accused that it never happens, but it does sometimes happen.
So you take the view that a race that actually a horse underperformed and still won, you'd have to bring them all backwards?
Well, yeah, we try to assess the form as we see it. More often than not, I'd say you'd probably be left on the same mark rather than a drop for a win, I would imagine, but there's probably the odd case where that has happened as well.
Does that satisfy your curiosity?
It answers the question, but I don't think it happens enough. I would throw out Fraudon as a classic example, actually. When he won the handicap chase in Wincanton off 158.
The Badger Ales.
He went back up £4. He ran to 156. His next start to King George. I'd say that whole race needed to come down, but because he won, they went up. Mathematically, that to me, you should look at his next run, which obviously you do as well.
Yeah.
And to me, I would have looked at that and thought, oh, you know what? That needs to go the other way. Not up, it needs to go down. That's only my opinion. I'm not the handicapper.
Well, that's an ongoing process that we do with all races. We're looking the next time they run, move up or down, depending on what happens with the horses in future.
Okay. Michael, thank you very much for suffering that grilling.
It wasn't a grilling.
I know, I'm kidding. Next person
Wait till Andrew comes in.
The next person to be lightly toasted is going to be Andrew Mealor. He's going to join us in a few moments.
Why can some horses jump and others can't?
I once heard a stat from a very clever man who is a jumping coach, and he explained it to me that 10% of horses can naturally jump, 10% of horses will never jump, they just can't, and the 80% in the middle can be taught to jump correctly or wrongly.
And now we have swapped Michael Harris for Andrew Mealor, who's one of the British Horseracing Authority's team leader handicaps. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to start off with some general questions.
Okay.
And let's have a look at those, shall we? We can start off by having a look at those. So we're going to start with David Johnson, Timeform Bods, getting in touch. So I'll deal with them together. Plenty of questions, said David. Seem to think that there's an anti-Irish bias at play because the handicap levels of the two jurisdictions remain different, especially around younger horses, hence the fact we're throwing this at you because you're dealing with hurdlers rather than chasers. Yeah. Are there any future plans to remedy that, or is it just easier to put your tin hat on once a year?
I think I need the tin hat more than once a year, but anyway. We have made some strides over the past couple of years to try and harmonise things. So, for example, we now have a unified weight for age scale, which is a sort of technical, which would have been a sort of technical drawback in the past to having the same set of ratings. I mean, there are still some issues in different rules between the two systems. So, for example, in Ireland, you have to re-qualify to get your handicap marks over fences. In Britain, you can go straight into a handicap chase off your hurdle mark. So, if we were to harmonise the systems, one country would have to change the rules on that. In Britain, we can and do adjust the horse's hurdle mark based on chase form and vice versa. In Ireland, they tend not to do that, so that's another difference. So, I mean, I don't think it's certainly not imminent, but, I mean, look, if we could actually get towards that, or at least bring the two scales closer together, then that probably will benefit everyone.
I think it would, wouldn't it? Now, you were having a reaction at some point while Andrew was talking.
I was laughing. I was just thinking, I always baffled me moving the hurdle mark because you won over fences. Like, your world ranking doesn't rise in the 800 metres because you won the 3000.
Yeah, but I mean, you'll get examples where, I mean, let's say a horse has 3 runs in novice.
You're just afraid of someone having one and going back over hurdles to exploit a mark. That's what you're afraid of. Tell the truth.
If you have a horse, say it's had 3 runs in novice hurdles and it's rated around 120, and then it doesn't run over hurdles for 5 years, and it's now a 160 rated chaser, I mean, should that really be going back in a handicap hurdle off 120?
Yeah, because that was a handicap hurdle mark. So it's only going to run once before you give it the 40 anyway.
Because you can't guarantee it'll win or anything.
No,
but
you can't.
Pretty much
Tyrannus did, and it came in after that, wasn't it, Tyrannus?
What you can guarantee is they'll go for a very short price.
Exactly. And what's it going to win right at 120 in England? $6,000?
Because I mean, ultimately, we're just trying to frame a competitive race, so that's why we do it.
Unfortunately, there will be an outlier every now and then. And yeah, I don't agree with that one. Moving on.
Fair enough.
Let's have a look at Dan's quote, shall we, as well, because he's a regular, of course, on the show. And actually, we'll be seeing him next week. More of that later on. Why do people insist on suggesting the BHA have given him, her, good use of the pronouns? You're on message with the pronouns there, Dan. X pound extra on his, her Irish mark, as if this is some arbitrary process done when declared, rather than a rating they'd have assigned the horse the day after each of its runs. And why won't this reality sink in with the public?
Yeah, this is an excellent point made by my ex-Timeform colleague.
Sticking together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this was a point I made yesterday at the Cheltenham press conference. We don't, as Dan says, we don't just look at the Irish mark and think, right, he's 135 in Ireland, we're going to add on £4, £5, £6, whatever. We actually we handicap all Irish national hunt races ourselves. And it is those figures that we use for handicap marks for Irish horses, just the same as what we do in Britain, with the intention of then having a level playing field.
And how many members of the team?
So there's 12 on the team at the moment.
And you're each got a different division.
Yeah,
it
so
can change a little.
Yeah, I mean, I do 2 mile hurdles. Martin Greenwald, who people may have seen with the Grand National weight, he does staying chasers and so on.
And so you would be doing the same set of horses in
Yes.
Ireland constantly?
Exactly. So then you get that continuity, and in theory, then you will have the levels, roughly the same.
And the bigger differences tend to be over hurdles rather than over fences for the reasons that you've
Yeah, because I mean, you have hurdlers, because when horses are just starting out and they're in novice hurdles, maiden hurdles, those are the type of races, because there's very little form to go on, those are the type of races where there's going to be a bigger difference of opinion between handicappers. I mean, even within our members of our team, someone might look at a race and think, well, I could be 120, 125. I might say, well, actually, I'd be a bit higher, because that's just the nature of those races. So it's no surprise that we would then tend to differ more with the Irish handicappers around those races.
And is that a chat that you would all have as part of the British team quite regularly? I mean, are there sort of some races where you all go, actually, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I mean, if I have a race where I'm just scratching my head, thinking, well, I could be my, if I've got a really big window of what the race could be, I will ask someone else, say, look, just what do you think? Because you want a bit of consistency across the team, obviously.
Okay,
you obviously have to have your own opinion. That's what handicapping is, and it's the one job within the IHRB, within the BHA, where you're paid for your opinion. Everybody else has to follow rules. But if you are watching Irish racing all the time, to back up Dan's point, it would be no surprise to anybody if he published these ratings that you have all the time, but they're not published. So, Dan, that's why it creates the confusion, because these marks that you have are not published.
Is there a fear that it could seem as a tacit slight on your overseas colleagues?
I don't think it's necessarily that. It's more a sort of technical aspect. I mean, so at the moment, the situation is we update an Irish horse's mark either when it runs in a race in Great Britain or they enter for a race in Great Britain. That's when we do it. So obviously all these horses have entered to Cheltenham with allotted marks for them. Obviously, all British horses have their marks published on the BHA website every week, and everyone can see what they are. I'm just not. I mean, at the moment, I'm not even sure where we would publish the Irish marks. There were technical issues with that. I mean, it's something we can look at, because we don't want. The one thing we don't want to be accused of is not being transparent, because that's something we do strive to be. So, yeah, look, if it's felt to be a sort of major issue, then maybe it's something we'll have to look into.
Okay, well,
Burning Victory in the flats jumps to mind. She was much lower on the flat in France than she was in Ireland. That's just one horse in my own head. So she then went and ran twice in handicaps in France to run off her mark in France, which eventually equated to the one she had in Ireland. But yeah, you'd look at it. So, and I would think vice versa. You might look at a horse, an English trained horse, and think, whoa, I'm rated 150 here. Sandy Shaw and Gary and Shay Quinn in Ireland only rate me 130. They might go and run in Ireland, and the Irish ones might come and race here. Actually, if you had the two marks, you might see much more of a crossover, which might help to harmonise it.
No, that's a good point. I mean, the one point I would make is that if any Irish trainer, owner wants to know what the mark of their horse is, they just have to get in touch.
Well, interestingly, there's actually a tweet about that. If we can have a look at Neil Lindsay from YouTube, he was talking about this a few weeks ago, Neil, and I thought at the time this is something that we ought to discuss. And he makes this point exactly. It's clear. Do you think it's well known enough that? Yeah, I mean, I've stated it enough times. But clearly, it isn't, judging by his tweets. So yeah, so the situation is, you do not have to enter to find out your mark. You can if you want to find out that way, that's fine. So you can enter for the race. You can ring up the relevant handicapper, you can email the relevant handicapper, you can text the relevant handicapper, and whichever method you choose to find out your mark, the mark will be the same, the decision will be no different. So you don't have to enter for the race, there are other methods. You want to stress that,
yeah,
stress that to
absolutely.
Everybody. Okay, Simon Rowlands is the next voice that we're going to hear from. And he makes this point: does the handicapping team do enough on an ongoing basis to educate the public, as well as sections of the racing media, it seems, about the basics of handicaps, so that events like the Grand National Weights last week and the Cheltenham Weights this week are not so widely misunderstood? Now, I was at neither of those press conferences because I've been away, but what do you think of Simon's general point about education? Yeah,
I mean, I think we do what we can. So, for example, me and myself and Michael are on this show today. We're talking about handicapping. We have the Handicappers blog on the website after the big meetings, which sort of explains the decisions around the big horses. We attend industry courses. So, for example, when trainers apply for their licence, they have to go to the British Racing School to do the trainers course. One of the modules is a handicapping module, and myself or one of my colleagues will go along and present for 2 or 3 hours about handicapping. So there's lots of things we do. I mean, look, if anyone's got any suggestions, things they would like to see that we could do more, then, we're all ears.
The handicapping section...
That's brave.
It is. You never want unsolicited emails or solicited emails for that matter.
Brave.
The microsite of the British Handicapping microsite as well as in.
Yeah, I mean that's actually a good point. There's an awful lot of information on there. So if you just go to Google, type in BHA Guide to Handicapping, and there is a lot of quite technical stuff on there about how we do things. So yeah, if you're interested, definitely have a look there.
And your contact details are all on there as well.
Yeah, maybe we'll keep them.
That's back to Ruby's point. Now, Ruby wanted to raise a quote from Kevin Blake. This is in his At the Races column. I think this is a really interesting point.
Yeah, it was sent to me yesterday evening by someone who does like to punt anti-post, who was quite irate, and quite rightly. And you can read it here yourselves. The weights were actually released behind closed doors yesterday, but it seems the BHA, etc., etc. The lay has at least given those of us who had access to them yesterday plenty of time to hammer through them and pull out the most pertinent information. Therefore, as this person said to me, some people had a head start for those that wanted to punt anti-post. Now the BHA is all for transparency. That's not a level playing field if you're a punter.
I'm guessing that that's people with access to the racing admin
Whatever
site.
they are, whoever had access,
It's wrong.
some people had them before everybody else did. And now this is the watchers, the BHA, who are into transparency and into looking at what everyone else is doing. Well, we're looking at you. That's not fair.
And we should point out that this is not
to do with the
nothing to do with the
This was
handicappers.
to do with the BHA.
Yeah, and presumably, I wouldn't just say it was the British Horseracing Authority.
Who
it would
has
also
the
be
marks?
the race courses involved, I would imagine, in terms of wishing to promote their major races. I'd imagine it's some sort of conversation
Funnily,
between
who owns,
the two.
Who owns the product? Is this the problem in British racing? Who's in
I can
charge?
hear-
Who is in charge of that particular product? That is owned. The handicap is owned by the BHA. That was their material to release. They're in charge of integrity. That was not done with integrity in mind.
Yeah, I think this is an issue that needs addressing. It does absolutely need to be changed. This is not the only set of races where this has happened either. I think I'm right in saying the Lincoln was subject to a similar delay.
Yeah, that's not fair to punters who they're supposed to be batting for.
Okay.
I mean, can I just
Yeah, of course,
just to
please
come in
do.
there? I mean, they were officially embargoed. So we finalised the weights on Monday. Obviously, they go to Weatherby's, who run all the admin for British Racing, and they were supposed to be embargoed until 12 noon on Wednesday, which is when the Cheltenham press conference was. So I don't actually know what. Obviously, Kevin has had access to them somehow, which obviously that'll have to be looked into.
Yeah, absolutely. It will do. I was guessing how it might be. Maybe it was via another way. Anyway, so those are our general thoughts. You still feeling you don't want to run away?
No,
You're
no,
quite happy?
crack on.
You're quite relaxed, right? Okay. Let's get on with the Boodles, shall we? Let's have a look at the betting for the Boodles. Fred Winter, juvenile handicap hurdle, for which Takao is the 4-1 favourite. I think we have a tweet involving Takao. DJ Morgan is talking about 135. Why is this horse rated just £1 or £2 higher than Beau Zenith, and is it Perseus Way?
Yeah, so Beau Zenith is 133 and Perseus Way is 132. I mean, just reading the tweet now, that's just his opinion that Takao's form is far superior, isn't it? That's not fact. I mean, Takao's rating comes from when he was third in the Grade 1 or left. I mean, that was actually quite a big jump up from his previous one. I think even in Ireland his mark went up £7 or £8 for that race. I mean, that looks a good run. Obviously, Willie Mullins he's got the top horse in the division, so he can afford to send this horse to the Boodles. I mean, just on the two Gary Moore horses, Perseus Way, I mean, he ran a cracker on Saturday in the Adonis. I mean, he was conceding way to the win in Nusret. Really good run. He actually went up £7 for that. So I think the trainer maybe, judging by the conversation I had with him on Monday, possibly regretting running in that race with the Boodles in mind. But obviously, we'll see what happens in 2 weeks' time.
Okay, the second part of that tweet we can take a look at as well. So this is the point that involves Perseus Way. So Shockster was talking about that, talking about when Samuel Spade and Perseus Way bumped into each other in the Chatteris Fen, and Samuel Spade was conceding £8.
Yes, I mean, really good run from Samuel Spade that day. I mean, the simple explanation to that is the Perseus Way's rating now comes from his Kempton runs, because he improved when he ran at Kempton. I'll say really good run from Samuel Spade in the Huntingdon race, but that race, even though Perseus Way has gone and done what he's done at Kempton, the Huntingdon race really can't be any higher at the moment, judging on what the third and fourth are rated. So I've just left that where it is for now, and Samuel Spade stays on 126.
So that's basically a horse improving.
Yeah, obviously when a horse improves, we then go back and look at the previous race and think, right, does this race now need to move based on the latest evidence? And in that case, I decided, well, no, it doesn't. So Samuel Spade stayed where he was.
Okay.
I'll be for that, by the way. One horse can improve, just that doesn't mean the race has.
Yeah. But the point that I think Andrew is making is that it's done on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, it's just you look at the race and
good
you think,
to hear.
Yeah, it's just the judgment call, basically.
Yeah. Right. I was very interested, Ruby, in the race won by Sir Alan at Navan. It has provided the winner of the Fred Winter in 3 of the past 4 years.
Probably has, but I thought it was a miss. And Biker is in behind Sir Alan is in the yellow colour. No, Sorella. Which one was Sorella?
Yellow
It was
with
in
the
yellow,
with
yeah.
the purple.
Danny Mullins on the right, and Biker, who was caught in the pocket down the inside off the bend, is switched out by Philip Benright going to the last. Biker doesn't really fly the last. Gets in a bit close, lands steeply, goes to lug in behind, and does come home rather well, Biker. This race has a good record for the Boodles Fred Winter. Biker would be of interest. I think another one that's gone off the off the radar even, who was a horse who won early in the year, was Cougar, and he had some really good form early in the year. He's a mark of 129 now for last year's winning trainer Paulie Roach, who won it with Brazil. This was Cougar backing down Royal way back when. Third horse Snappiest didn't exactly frank the form at Haydock last week, but I thought Cougar was really good on this occasion, and I thought he was sneaky at 129.
What's happened since to him?
He had a disappointing run at Christmas. And
Was that at Limerick when he was beaten in the match?
He ran in Leopardstown and lost him out, didn't he?
Yeah, he ran in the grade 1. He was disappointing that.
Grade 2. And
Sorry, yeah, grade 2. Yeah.
I'd say it wouldn't be surprised if he reappears as the Cougar that won in the autumn.
Okay, interesting. I was having a mental flip with Brazil there, wasn't I? Wrong, right colours.
Same trainer.
Wrong gauge.
Same horse.
Wrong gauge.
Both still full horses? I think they are.
Right, okay, Coral Cup next on. Coral Cup next up. You know the form by now. Let's have a look at the betting. There it is. Quite wide open. Shape of the race, Andrew. Where do you see the cut-off point being, and how does this race, in terms of at the weight stage, compare to previous?
Yeah, I mean, a lot
years?
of the horses at the top of the weights have got entries in other races, so I'm not 100% sure what's going to turn up, and obviously that will impact on exactly where the top weight ends up, etc. In terms of the cut-off, the entries are a bit down this year, so it's usually mid 130s. I think we'll probably be looking at low to mid 130s this year, so it'll probably go just a little bit lower than normal.
Okay, just to take you back to the Fred Winter, I never asked you where the cut-off you thought.
Yeah, the cut-off will definitely be lower for that race this year. I mean, look, it will be mostly Irish runners. I think Britain only had 7 or 8 runners in the race last year. Almost certainly similar again this year. The cut-off the last couple of years has been 122, 123. I suspect lower, 120, maybe even lower than that.
Okay, so that's for the Boodles Fred Winter, just to clarify. Let's go back to the Coral Cup now. You're going to take some juvenile form from last season, Ruby.
Yeah, look, I struggled with the Coral Cup. I struggled a bit when I was riding it. Not sure I ever finished in the first 5, and I struggled to pick the winner of it too. But I was only going on Ikera Allen purely through field though. This was last year's Triumph Vauban Pied Piper. Now Ikera Allen has a very bad run in the Betfair hurdle to put behind him. That's Ilete Tomp in the green and red coming on the extreme right. But for this run, Ikera Allen is £12 better off with Fiondor. Now it's easy to argue Fiondor is in better form, but if I was looking for one that possibly stepping up in trip that has form at the venue, not the track, because this new course, they've been running on the old course, that was the only reason I picked them out. It wasn't a race that I really thought there's one jumping already.
Trip might help with his jumping.
The trip might help with his jumping, that would be a help. Look, I just thought he wasn't even on the betting caption we had there, but I just thought, looking for one, I was thinking, well, he's £12 better off at him for that run. If it did happen, you could see why.
Yeah, I mean, it was very disappointing Newby, wasn't it? I think, did they say that? They said the ground was a bit quick, maybe.
So it could be as quick in Cheltenham.
Well, exactly, yeah, that was the point I was going to make. We'll have to wait and see what conditions are like at Cheltenham, yeah. So.
Okay. How about Winter Fog, also for Willie Mullins, entered in this and in the county?
Yeah, very un-Willie-like. First run for him, used a claimer. Kieran Callahan gave him a great ride at Christmas, and he bolted in, claimed 7 off 136 to bring him to 129, and he got the subsequent penalty for the distance he wins here. You'll have to claim off him again, so you'd imagine Kieran will keep the ride. But yeah, look, he could, Lydia, but he's gotten the rise that win deserved.
Yes, you think a quieter way into this race might be the way forward?
I would have thought, yeah, possibly.
Run style?
Probably has form over 3. Didn't look like he got home in a Pertemps qualifier last year when he was trained by Emmett, so he could easily run the Coral Cup.
I meant for the Coral Cup. So
yeah, again, as I said, I could never ride a winner of it or get involved in it. So run style, definitely don't have an opinion
That's
on
somebody
it.
else.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move straight on to the Pertemps, shall we, and have a look straight away at the betting for that. Now, first of all, we should say, as we look at Shoot for First, the 7-2 favourite, that the qualifying rules for this have changed in that 33% of horses that were formerly be able to qualify are now no longer able to qualify, i.e. horses that finish 5th and 6th in the qualifier.
So it used to be first 6, that's gone, it's now first 4.
Yeah, so has that had an impact on number of entries?
Yeah, well, there's only 35 qualified, which is, well, certainly the lowest definitely I can remember, and that will obviously have an effect on the cut-off. So the current 24th horse, which is the bottom horse to get in at the moment, is 128, which is very low for the Cheltenham Handicap, and obviously if some horses come out, that could go lower still.
And might there be some out of the handicap in
possibly,
this?
yeah. If the horses at the top of the weight stand their ground, I think we'll still get a full field. I think Nicky Henderson's got 6 qualified, and he's indicated he's going to run them all. I think Gordon Elliott's got 4 they're going to run, so that's 10 runners already. So I still think we'll get a full field, but yeah, there's definitely a lower number qualified, as you would expect, given the changes to the qualification rules.
Are you happy with the changes?
I mean, to me, it largely boils down to field size, doesn't it? If you have, I mean, for example, the qualified at Leopardstown at Christmas, which is traditionally a very strong, one of the strongest races, and you've got 25 runners. To get in the first 6 in that race, you've still got to run pretty well. You might get races over here where we generally have smaller field sizes. You might only get an 8 or 9 runner race. And to get in the first 6, you might finish 6th, but you might be the last finisher in the race, so you don't really have to sort of do much. So I think definitely first 4 it was a good idea.
Should we have qualifying at all, I suppose, is the question.
Yeah, it could just be an open 3-mile handicap. That'd be the other option, wouldn't it?
Any thoughts on that, Ruby?
First good idea you've had all day.
Oh, but it probably is. Let's have a look at a tweet. This is from Michael Hannon. He's asking about Shoot First, Andrew. He says he gets £10 for winning a Pertemps qualifier driven out by 2 lengths at Cheltenham. Thanks for the help. Gets £11 for an eased down 6.5 lengths win in Chepstow. Where's the logic for the rise in Shoot First mark compared to the latter?
It's quite, I mean, Shoot First, that's quite an interesting, so I think that was the first qualifier of the season at Cheltenham. Now, 3 of the first 4, including the winner Shoot First, have not been seen since. So they've got themselves, presumably, we don't know for definite, but they've got themselves qualified, and presumably they were very happy, and they're happy to wait back and come back with the final. Now, the only horse who has run out the first 4 is the runner-up Botox Has, trained by Gary Moore. He went and won the big staying handicap on Betfair Chase Day at Haydock. Obviously, form went up, and hence why Shoot First has got a pretty hefty rise for that win. As for the David Pipe horse that they mentioned, that just absolutely bolted up at the weekend, and I suspect David Pipe was happy with the big rise because it's got him in the race.
Yeah, okay. That point, Ruby, that Andrew made in passing there about horses being in effect laid out and not seeing them, it's not a good net thing for horse racing, is it? That horses just wait all season for one run? Yeah,
but it can look at it 2 ways. I mean, have they been running through the autumn? Are they autumn spring horses, or are people putting winter horses away? And I'd say when you see a lot of those horses turning up again in March on what will be good to soft ground, they're just predominantly not winter horses. So I think a lot of them, not all of them, people will have run horses and thought, whoa, yeah, we're not going any further here. But maybe Charles Boodles would be thinking, if I had run him twice more and he ran poorly, I mightn't have got as much big a penalty.
Of course, we don't know they've been put away. They may have had setbacks. Who knows? But that's the sort of I think that's the sort of indication, isn't it?
Yeah. Let's have a look next at, this is the Ballywall from 2 years ago. This is Bear Gills, Ruby, that you've picked out for the Pertemps.
Yeah, look, we saw him a while ago, Lydia, in the Beauport race. He went chasing and hasn't. But look, he is a horse with a huge engine. He's obviously very fragile, and I just thought he was dropping back to a decent mark. Look, Braesman's game, Bob Ollinger, Goyard and Mealor, Bear Gills is right beside him. He had the ability to go to the second last in the Ballymore with them. He's now in a Pertemps off a mark of 136.
Okay, he's tried chasing, hasn't he? And that hasn't quite worked. He hasn't really gone on from that point. How about Lieutenant Rocco?
I just thought looking for one that has completely plummeted in the weights, and it was Lieutenant Rocco, and here he is winning a chase at Kempton, but he has completely plummeted down the rates and went and won in his last start. So maybe the engine is restarting to fire in Lieutenant Rocco, and if he is, well, he's most certainly been given a chance.
Okay, so that is Lieutenant Rocco. Ruby's 2 suggestions for the
And that's
Pertemps.
all they are, is suggestions.
I have to be honest, I tend to look at the handicaps when I've actually got the final field.
I agree with you. And same when I was riding. What was the point? Like, what are you going to ride in the Coral Cup? Well, you tell me what's going to be top weight.
I suppose the Pertemps is maybe the one race where you could look at the weights and think, well, this is going to be more or less the final for it. Whereas, yeah, you're right with the other races. You know, so many horses double entered.
No, that's a fair point about the Pertemps, actually. Right, okay, let's have a look at the county. Now, the much discussed Filey Bay is at the top of the market at 5-1, and actually I might go straight to the discussions that have been had about this horse before we talk to Ruby about his thoughts about the race. So, Grant James Thomas has said this: Filey Bay rated 133 going into the Betfair Hurdle, raised £4 to 137 for finishing second. Orcan Risk was raised 9 to 147. How do you explain this? And I think Richie has explained. Is that correct?
Yeah, good, well done, Richie. Actually, funny enough, Orcan Risk trainer actually rung me last week with exactly the same.
Chris Gordon.
Yeah, exactly the same query. You know, why am I up £9 and Filey Bay is up 4? I said, Chris, don't worry. Filey Bay is up 8. I can absolutely guarantee it. I think there's been a bit of confusion because his Irish mark is obviously published, and that is £4 higher than he ran off at Newbury. But with us, he's definitely £8 higher.
Okay, this is the problem though with the misconceptions.
Is that a pseudo account of yours, Richie? Answering questions for you.
Let's have a look at some other. I think there's some other misconceptions that we can take a look at. Okay, so here's another conversation between Ferdy Moore Racing, Grant James Thomas again, and Neil Tonson. And at the bottom there, we've got the handicapper from Neil saying the handicapper may have looked at the sectionals and realised that the second was the best horse in the race and did not want to be embarrassed by a county hurdle procession. Again, this is the problem, isn't it? So the misconceptions that exist because of the fact that there are two different marks.
I mean, actually, what I would say, just because it was a British race, we do publish performance figures for all British races on the BHA website, so anyone would be able to see that actually Filey Bay had run to 141 in that race, and obviously you could surmise from that that would be his new handicap mark.
So if you go to the BHA website...
Yeah, look on the results, and for all British handicaps, our performance figures will be there.
Yeah.
And does your performance... What do you call it again?
Performance figure.
Figure. Does that mean that is your new handicap mark?
They are the figures we use to allot the handicap marks. In the instance of Filey Bay, that's his best run so far, so that would be his handicap mark. That wouldn't necessarily always be the case.
So it's on your guide?
Yes.
Right. So basically it goes back to the very same theory that we need 2 sets of ratings published.
Yeah, well, that was the earlier discussion, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. All harmonised. One of the two. Right. In terms of the shape of the race, where's the cut-off point? What do you think about how the count is looking?
Yeah, the entries are down. So again, the cut-off will be down. 134 last year, below 130s this year. I mean, it was very obvious from the race last year. I think there was only 7 British runners. Looking at the weights again, the way they are, it's likely to be the same again because a lot of the Irish entries are predominantly up the top of the weight. A lot of the British entries are down the bottom. So it just depends exactly where the cut-off is, but there's going to be a lot of Irish runners.
Okay, so there's the betting again. Filey Bay at the top. Jin Coco, who I would assume has been laid out for this since his second in the Great Wood at 8-1, and Hunter's Yarn, Ruby. I'm reminded the last 2 years, Stateman dotting up in the county hurdle, Galloping de Champs dotting up in the Martin Pipe. Is Hunter's Yarn one of those?
I suppose if he had Stateman's rating or maybe a little less, you would say yeah, but I would think the handicappers have him fairly square at 147. Good, strong travelling horse who goes well. He's only a novice. He ticks the right boxes, but is he as good a horse as Stateman? I don't know, and he's carrying a lot more than Stateman was.
Imagine in the red and white colours there, Gordon Elliott was talking quite positively about him earlier this week, and the horse has been backed.
Yeah, 139. Hunter's Yarn is 147, so there's £8 between them for that race there. Yeah, look, 6 lengths. Imagine, yeah, Gordon does tend to lay a lot of horses out, so possibly.
He's got a lot of horses.
Yeah, he has, hasn't he? So has Willie Mullins.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's have a look at Colonel Mustard. This is a horse that tried novice chasing this season. Didn't really take to it with any kind of verve, but he was a very good herber as his county hurdle performance on last season shows. Yeah,
and look, on the new course as well, Lydia travelled strongly and arrived into the rest from the second last up to the home turn, and that was off a mark of 143 last year. Finished third, down to 140 now, I think.
I think he's still on 140. I'm pretty sure he's on the same mark.
On the same mark. But then he went up from 140 to 143 for this run. But look, his runs haven't worked out over fences, but it's hard to say that First Street or Stateman haven't made this a pretty good performance.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's the key thing. Is that form did work out really well. It was a proper strong handicap form.
Okay, so that is the county, and then we're going to move on to the race that ends things and ends our show as well, and that is the Martin Pipe. Spanish Harlem 11-2, 3-card brag at 6-1. Before I go straight into those horses, Ruby, fear from Andrew about the shape of the race again. This is always an intriguing race. Sometimes a very, very, very good horse can be lurking here. And I mentioned Galloping Deschamps.
We've often had good horses come out of this race. I mean, to be honest, trying to nail a likely run of the minute is extremely difficult. I think there's only 12 of the entries are actually solely entered in this race. Everything else has got county hurdle, Cobble Cup, etc., etc. So it'll be interesting to see what actually turns up. Entries are down again, like in the other handicaps, so the cut-off will be down. It's 132 the last 2 years. Again, it's probably going to be a bit lower. I think 130 will maybe get you in the race this year.
Okay. Before we talk about 3-card brag and Spanish Harlem, Ruby, I'm going to discuss the story of Langadan, who ran into Galloping Deschamps 2 years ago, then was brought down at the first last year. What at Aintree since then? What do we make him as a proposition this time around?
Trying to make a third time lucky, isn't he? And maybe he will, Lydia. What do you make of him? Look, he's come back down in the ratings to say, yeah, he definitely has a good chance. Can you knock any horse for not being able to beat Galloping Deschamps?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And his runs this year, I've seen him drop from 145 back to 141. Obviously up to 145 after winning at Aintree. He's back down to 141. You're watching him there running off 137, so he's 4 pounds higher. Would that? That's not that race. He was 4 pounds higher last year, 137. Would that be good enough? Good chance.
There he is at the back, and this is the very first hurdle last season. You plan your entire season, and that happens.
And how unlucky was he? Like, he was banged down the inside, and he was nearly gone by when his hind legs got taken out from underneath him.
And then he went on to win at Aintree.
Yeah.
But what do you make of him this season and what he's done?
Sure, he ran okay, I suppose, at Aintree behind Romeo Brown and never got involved behind Maria's Rock in the Cleve?
Yes. No, Relkiel.
Relkiel.
Yeah. And obviously, connections are feared, particularly in this race. The Skelton team very good at laying one out for a handicap.
They won the Martin Pipe.
Have they won the Martin Pipe?
Won a few counties, didn't they?
Yeah, definitely got to reckon the county hill. I'm not sure about the Martin Pipe. They might not have won that race.
Yeah. Okay.
Not so feared in the Martin Pipe.
No. But they've run into a Galloping Deschamps, so they're probably feeling a...
You want to get a bigger gun?
Right, I've built up the anticipation. 3-card brag versus Spanish Harlem.
I would be for 3-card brag. Obviously, there's a good swing in the weights for this run at Fairyhouse, but I think there need to be. I think 3-card brag has been. He stuck out to me for this race all year. Now, I do believe Connections could well run him in the Albert Bartlett, but having watched him win at Galway early in the year and move forward from there, he's looked like he wants to step up in trip. He won a 2-mile maiden at Galway. He stepped up. He was beaten then by Hurtling the Soil at 2 mile, 2.5 a second in the pocket, 2.5. He beat Spanish Harlem by 12 lengths, hit the line strong. We're a long way out, Lydia. I thought he had all the potentials for this race.
You have mentioned that a few times during the course of the series. But how about Spanish Harlem's run at Thurles?
Thurles was a better run than Fairyhouse, but I think 3-card brag would need, or Spanish Harlem would need 3-card brag not to run. Spanish Harlem 135 is probably a fair rating for him. Rian beat him on this occasion. Fast track Thurles would somewhere stiffer like Cheltenham suit him. You'd think so, but he didn't exactly bomb home from the line of Fairyhouse behind 3-card brag, so 135 is fair enough for him.
Okay. So, we've come to the end of our gallop through the various handicaps from the festival. Andrew, thank you very much for enduring all of those questions and fielding the questions from every angle, really.
Yes, okay, it's no problem.
Yeah, and as you said, they can, I think hopefully people will be a bit more enlightened.
Yeah, well, if people are interested, as I say, there's a guide to handicapping on the website, or just get in touch.
Yeah, okay. So that's the end of this week's show. Time to say goodbye to Ruby. We will have a sneak peek at next week's show, which is on at a different time, Ruby, 6:15 p.m. for Road to Cheltenham next Thursday.
Not so bad. Time we finish that?
7:30.
Get to 9:15 home, that's all right.
I'm glad that suits you. We're also going to be joined by Dan Barber of this parish.
Why?
Well, it's a special show, and we're going to have lots of special guests. I'm really going to enjoy you and Dan and the chats between the two of you. But there'll be lots of special guests as well. So it's a special edition. And the week before the Cheltenham Festival itself, we will be convening here at 6:15 p.m. next Thursday. Make sure you join us for a different look show. Ruby, thank you for your thoughts today. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you at that different time next week.
Paddy Power, sponsors of the road to Cheltenham.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.